Hi everyone, it's Lindsay,
And Tamara.
and you're listening to Take Me to Chelsea, a podcast where two Canadians rewatch and discuss an episode of the hit UK reality TV show Made in Chelsea. Today we are discussing Season 1, Episode 3, I'm So Honest with Everyone, Maybe It's a Downfall, which originally aired on May 23rd, 2011. Okay, let's pop the champagne.
Okay, so for our synopsis today, Spencer and CJ take their rivalry to the shooting range, where Spencer edges out CJ in more ways than one. Funda takes the opportunity to confront Keggy head-on, and Keggy doesn't exactly reassure her. Spencer tells Funda not to worry, his heart lies with her, and then immediately turns on Keggy and accuses her of meddling. She calls him out for his BS and storms off. Meanwhile, despite finally scoring a lunch with Amber, Hugo's pursuit ultimately falls flat when Rosie is invited to third-wheel their date. Surprisingly, it's neither Amber nor Rosie who Hugo ends up kissing. At a charity auction thrown by Francis and his new assistant Agne, everything comes to a head for Ollie and Gabby, and he breaks her heart in one of the most painful and awkward breakup scenes I think I've ever watched.
Okay, so we start the episode at the shooting range. Once again, Keggy is forced to interact with Funda and Spencer against her will, and it really comes to a head when Funda actually confronts Keggy about everything that's been going on.
Super aggressive. Immediately walks up to Keggy, ignores Spencer, who's there as well, and says, "Okay, Keggy, I'm ready to speak to you now."
Yeah, and I think there was obviously a little bit of a setup element to that interaction. It was super forced and aggressive, like not seamless or no natural segue. Just like, okay, time for us to shoot this scene where I confront you and you kind of explain yourself, which is funny and like a hallmark of Made in Chelsea. It's like you're in the middle of a conversation with somebody and you get pulled away to the side to have a dramatic interlude while the something else is happening.
Yeah, and I've got to say, Keggy, I don't think comes off very well in her first experience with being confronted. We've seen her confront Spencer a couple times, and we've seen her pal around with her friends, but the first time that she's confronted, I don't think she handles it very well. She probably lets off a little bit more, or lets out a little bit more than she would otherwise like to. She's extremely honest with Funda. She talks about how she and Spencer have quite openly talked about what might happen if they got together. This is not a conversation that you want to be having with someone's girlfriend.
Yeah, and I think like we were commenting in the last episode that Keggy was pretty strong and we were kind of liking how she was handling things a bit with Spencer when he was so full on and she was kind of taking a step back, befriending Funda in a slight way at the dinner party. And now she's just basically telling Funda, yeah, I have feelings for your boyfriend. I like him more than a friend, but like nothing's going on. But we have all these repressed feelings, which is like,
I mean, that's quite a bizarre thing to say to someone, especially since at this point, I mean, Spencer's flirting with her and he's telling her how conflicted he is, but he hasn't actually said, "I want to leave my girlfriend for you." So I don't know if is she trying to kind of scare Funda out of this situation so she doesn't have to deal with her. Maybe she's hoping that Funda's literally going to yank Spencer away and say, "No more scenes with Keggy. You're done with Keggy." And Keggy can exit the awkward situation, because I don't think she's in it. I feel like this is kind of disingenuous. She doesn't seem to be someone who's emotionally invested in this. She just seems to kind of be saying, "Oh, we've talked about this." I don't feel any blood going to it though.
No, I don't either at this point. And so, yeah, her behavior, her motivations are kind of all over the place so far in the first three episodes. But again, I think Funda has been consistently mature and level-headed, and I think out of this whole situation, Funda comes off in a pretty decent light actually. think we were talking about in the previous episode that she's kind of cut or edited to be kind of like a villain in the show. A villain in the sense that she's Keggy's opposite, or like an antagonist to Keggy, who we're rooting for, right? So just being in that
Mm-hmm.
position, she's the villain. But she always comes across very composed, very mature. They haven't really showed a really bad side of her and how she's dealing with all this, except to say, like, why are you still with this guy?
She's very fair in how she deals with this whole situation. If it was me, I would be furious at everyone. I'd be furious at my boyfriend. I'd be furious at this woman. I would be so upset to be in this situation, but she's so fair. She comes up to Keggy and she just wants to know woman to woman what's going on. And you're right, it's a degree of maturity that just isn't there with Spencer and unfortunately doesn't seem to be there with Keggy either. So then Funda comes back to Spencer and confronts him about what she's learned from Keggy, and this immediately sets Spencer's teeth on edge. He is furious because, oh no, someone else is trying to meddle in his relationship. I mean, this man doesn't seem to understand that he has consistently tried to thwart his own relationship, and yet the idea that the other person that he's pursuing is now coming back and being honest about the kind of sneaky behavior. He's so upset about it. He's so mad, and he immediately puts Keggy in this light of like kind of how dare you meddle in my relationship? Like what gives you the right? And she naturally, and you have to be on her side here, or at least I was. She's like, go away. Like, I don't want to be in your relationship. Your girlfriend should not have been confronting me. I think that was so fair of Keggy, and she kind of switches back to that Keggy that we have talked about standing up for herself. And she's right. It's not her relationship. She shouldn't be having these conversations with this woman. This should be specifically between Spencer and Funda, and why is she getting dragged into it?
Yeah, and I don't think Keggy is a saint by any means here. I think it was fair of Funda to ask Keggy what was going on. I think Keggy is kind of being, in this episode, a little like doe eyed in a way. I can do no wrong. And like,
Mm-hmm.
we have to be clear here. Spencer is the one at fault. Spencer's being
Yeah.
the shady one, flirting with Keggy and then wanting Funda like at his home every night. Like, right? Like, he's the shady one here. But I
Mm-hmm.
think this episode's kind of sheds a bit more light or brings out a little another side to Keggy that does kind of imply that she is humoring it in a way that is maybe not appropriate. And even though she does stand up for herself as she should to Spencer, I think she also should be thinking how she's engaging with this situation too. Okay, so moving on, we have an exciting new love triangle or development, romantic development that we haven't really seen or even hinted at in the first two episodes with Millie, Rosie, and Hugo. Hugo and Amber are finally going on this lunch date that's been much hype, but she actually invites Rosie on this lunch date, and it's actually Rosie and Hugo that we can see some sparks begin to form here.
Okay, I'm going to disagree with you. I don't think there are sparks with Rosie and Hugo, but I think watching it over, and we've talked about in the past how we had a different perspective on this, but watching it over, we're starting to understand that Rosie likes Hugo and Amber was aware of this. So let's talk about that. That's kind of crazy, hey? You like someone and your friend is being pursued by that person and the problem that causes and how do you solve that? Well, Amber decides to invite Rosie on her date.
Yeah,
Super weird.
Amber's behavior is now coming into a lot more focus from the previous two
Mhm.
episodes because if she was in the know that Rosie maybe was having a crush on Hugo for a while, Amber's just being a good friend and she then finds conveniently leaves a date that she was never interested in to begin with. And then from there on, like once you're aware of that dynamic, you can really see how
Everything makes sense
Rosie,
after
yeah,
that. We saw Amber's weird behavior about the Facebook request. We saw her weird, like, dance around not wanting to go on a date with Hugo. And it wasn't really understandable because he seemed like a nice guy, very respectful. Like, why wouldn't you just, take a chance on him? But of course, if your best friend is interested in him, you're not going to be interested and you're going to do everything to shut that down. So I have to give props to Amber for handling this actually super well.
Yeah, and it's weird at the same time as we have this blossoming crush being presented here that we also have Millie, who's friends with Rosie, coming in really strong this episode with her potential feelings for Hugo, which is, she was focused on Fred for the last two episodes, and now it's like, okay, it's Hugo that I want.
And it comes from nowhere, too. She's just suddenly like, you know who would be a good boyfriend? Hugo. And Rosie gives her this look, like this surprised look. She's kind of, I feel like Rosie has been developing feelings for Hugo for a long time. It's established that they're friends. And for Millie to kind of come in, you're right, she was directed at Fred before, and now to come in randomly and be interested in Hugo. Um, I wonder how much stock their friends put in it. And maybe that's why Keggy kind of mentions, oh, Rosie likes her. I don't know that they take Millie's crushes too seriously.
Yeah, and again, I'm always skeptical of what is being orchestrated behind the scenes. So,
Oh, you think Millie and Hugo are fake?
yeah, I think at that point, I think Millie might have been directed to be flirty with Hugo.
For me, like this to me is like the beginning of a true love story. Like I have loved Millie and Hugo from when they were back in Made in Chelsea and having their problems, like in such support of this couple and seeing them get back together and now they're married and they have a sweet baby. I can't imagine him with anyone else. So I'm not going to hear anything else but Millie and Hugo.
Fair enough.
But okay.
And I think, yeah, of course they're happy now and it all ended as it should. But I mean, there's going to be some turbulent years ahead for you there.
maybe there's a producer who is invited to their wedding who's like secretly like, ha, I made this happen.
But I guess what we should really be focusing on and looking out for as we go forward is how much do we think Millie is aware of Rosie's feelings, and how much is she kind of being disrespectful to her friend versus how much is she really falling for Hugo, and what is Hugo's take on these two beautiful women who seem to be crushing on him.
Mm-hmm. I think we have to give some credit to Millie. I think she's coming in and staying her attention. I don't know how much she knew Rosie liked Hugo, and I think that has to do with how Rosie kind of is closed off about these sorts of things. I mean, we even see that with the dog therapist. She's she's depicted as lonely, but she won't really admit to it. I feel like Rosie is a very private person, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But someone like Millie, who's very upfront about these sorts of things, probably has difficulty understanding when someone is harboring secret, strong feelings. Maybe she thinks Rosie kind of has a crush on him, but isn't too serious.
True enough. I mean, we don't have to assume the worst of Millie, but
no, because if we assumed the worst, then she's a terrible friend. She literally got drunk and kissed Hugo, her friend's crush. I mean, that's terrible if she really knew about
I'm not
her
saying
feelings.
she's a terrible person, but she could have acted terribly in that situation.
So do you think that she knew Rosie liked Hugo to the extent that we assume she does?
Well, Keggy does explicitly say it to Millie before the auction when they're at the model casting. She's kind of saying, like, Millie, be careful because Rosie likes Hugo.
Again, I would say that Millie doesn't know how much. Because there's a big difference between, oh, your friend kind of thinks he's cute or whatever, and this person has been harboring feelings for this guy for a long time and don't get involved. Like, I don't think Keggy necessarily conveyed it to the extent that she should have if she didn't want Millie to go there, knowing who Millie is.
Yeah, so I guess we'll just wait to see what happens there. I mean, I do think Millie was super drunk, but also super cute with Hugo at the auction when she actually outbids Rosie for him. But I mean,
it gets a little tense there.
Yeah, I did feel bad for Rosie. Rosie bid on him.
I will say, going back and watching it again, I definitely have more sympathy for Rosie than I did when I first watched it. I kind of thought when I first saw it that Rosie kind of was staking her claim after the fact. But it's clearly there that, underneath it all, you can see that Rosie does like Hugo. So I sympathize. No one wants to see your friend, hook up with the guy that you're interested in.
And like we said before, with Rosie in the first episode with Amber, Rosie does seem very aware of how she's being portrayed. So I think it would
Mm-hmm.
be pretty humiliating for her if she
Mm-hmm.
put her feelings out there and she didn't
And they
get,
were rejected.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I want to talk about Frances and Agne because this is a dynamic that made me super angry watching it over. I don't remember getting as angry the first time I watched it, but now watching it really irked me. So we have Francis, who has been positioned, of course, as this business owner. He owns, I don't know, a diamond mine or a company that mines diamonds. Anyways, he's obviously got a very lofty position in this company, and he has hired an intern. She is put in there as kind of, I don't know, this, I don't know, I don't
Yeah.
even know what they're doing with her, but I have to rail against how she's being used and how Francis treats her because he goes from hot to cold with her, and it's so unprofessional, and it makes me hate him. And I love Francis, so
They kind of abandoned this version of Francis, but in the first season, oh my god, like the first scene or one of the early scenes, so he's naked getting massaged, to giving her orders, asking
mm-hmm.
her if she knows what a penguin is, correcting
Oh
her
my god.
grammar. Like it's
Oh my god.
so
It's so
rude.
gross.
And she seems to be kind of aware of what he's doing, but then also she seems to be like very complimentary of him. And
Yeah, she's
like,
flirty. But then,
yeah,
and then, okay, so they have this meeting. They're setting up a charity auction, which is a big event for this episode. And he invites these three women in, and he's, demeaning to them as well. He's very condescending. It's just, ugh.
and then you know what's like really infuriating? So he flirts with her, like calling her a fox, and then she's like, "Oh, you think I'm foxy?" Like she's playing along, but then
Yeah,
he like shuts it down and saying,
yeah.
"Oh, that's inappropriate." But he initiated it, so
He wants control.
he is like undermining her at every turn. So sexist, so misogynistic, and it's so infuriating. And this is like a
Yeah.
ridiculous plot, and it's I can't believe this was on TV.
If he had this sexy intern and there was a chemistry there, but he was trying to be professional and maybe she was trying to be professional as well, but they just had this chemistry. That's fine. That's like a office romance. That's normal. I don't care about that. But to position it kind of like you're right what you said. Like he has the reins. He shuts it down when he wants to and he turns it up when he wants to. Like at the end of the charity auction, he gives her a kiss on the cheek. I'm sorry, that is so inappropriate. You can't say, let's be professional, you're my employee, you're under me, and then kiss her. I hope it dies. I hope
I
it
hope it
stops.
dies like very soon.
Which we know it doesn't. Like, it carries on the whole season, but they're
Wait
trying to
for
make it a
that
love
moment.
story, though. Yeah, I don't know.
Are they trying to make a love story?
If I recall. I mean, we can get into it as we watch those episodes, but I seem to remember they're trying to make it kind of like a against the rules love story.
The problem with Made in Chelsea is when it has a cast that's not as integrated with the rest of the goings on. It's like they contrive these situations or plots that just really don't feel authentic at all. So the final plot point for this episode, of course, is the dramatic finale showdown with Ollie and Gabby. And we can't say we didn't see it coming, but it still hurt.
Yeah, we saw it coming from essentially episode one.
Yeah.
Ollie has obviously not wanted to be in this relationship for a long time, but right before, like, I think the last scene we see them in before this breakup, he is so rude to her. He just completely ignores her. She comes over to his house. She wants to hang out with him, and he can barely give her the time of day. Obviously, we know this is not going somewhere good.
From him just kind of seeming like unaware in the first two episodes, he starts this episode being like, it's not right, I have to end it. So he's obviously
Mm-hmm.
like processed some things or he's gotten some perspective that we were saying he didn't really have in the first two episodes.
But I think he kind of figures that out on screen. He's talking about how relationships have their up and down, and then he kind of stops and he says, "Oh, I've contradicted myself." I
Right.
feel like he had this kind of epiphany on screen of, I'm not happy and I need to do something about it. And he shows up late at the auction to end this relationship, a 10-month relationship, we learn.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, it's not insignificant. 10
No.
months, it's almost a year. That's a
In your
pretty significant
in your young
relationship.
20s, like that's huge.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Super devastating and dramatic breakup as only they could do, very very in character for
She
them. I feel, yeah, it's heartbroken for her in that moment.
And can we talk about the fact that he did it in this super public way? Like,
Yeah.
she is dolled up, she's dressed in nines, she's surrounded by presumably all her friends at this public charity event, and he decides to take her to the rooftop and dump her. I mean, there could have been probably a more appropriate private moment to do that. I mean, a breakup, especially one a 10-month-old relationship at that age, I mean, there's a follow. Breakups take time. It's not a 15-minute occasion. Breakups can go on for hours to talk about what happened and make sure feelings are addressed properly. So to do it on a rooftop when she's wearing a ball gown, I mean, it just seems a little bizarre.
Yeah, it seems a bit. I mean, that's why it's so raw at the same time, but it feels like a little disrespectful to your
Super
10-month
yeah.
relationship to do it that way. And yeah, I feel bad that Gabby had to have that as a breakup.
Wouldn't you end that scene and be so mad that he did it in front of the cameras like that? Like, this is your third episode, and you think, oh, I'm entering this television show with this guy I'm in love with, and and he dumps you right away. I mean,
she'll play into that herself, independent of Ollie coming up. So I guess it may be fitting. Okay, so Tam, what was your favorite moment of episode 3?
My favorite moment of episode 3 was Millie calling Hugo an eligible spatula because because I love Millie, and that was hilarious. So, yep, that was it.
So this was a bit of a hard one for me this week, but I think I've landed on Rosie and Noodle's dog therapy session with the dog therapist Tamara.
Yeah, that was me actually.
And I just thought it was like really ridiculous, and we were talking about the show and how they set up these ridiculous situations for their characters to bring out humor or just super weirdness.
Yeah, I mean, Chelsea's so good at that. They always have their characters in really weird circumstances.
Yeah, that they would obviously never do if it wasn't for the show, but it kind of does bring up some funny moments.
Yeah, the dog's so cute. So what are we listening to this week, Linz?
So we excitingly have some Canadian content on our playlist this week.
Woot.
We have the song Half-Life by Arcade Fire.
Do you remember we listened to that so much in 2011?
Yeah, it was definitely the soundtrack of our early 20s in that time. And yeah, every time I hear that album or this song in particular, it just takes me right back to all those angsty days.
Okay, so that was episode 3. Next week, we'll be talking about Hugo and Spencer's boys' night out with Francis and why they invited Agne of all people. As well, we get to see Hugo and Millie's very first date, and we find out the real reason why Ollie and Gabby broke up. You definitely don't want to miss it.